Is it possible that, after a shameful double disqualification, Lewis Hamilton still believes Ferrari can win? Is he truly convinced, or is he just faking it in front of the cameras? In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into why Hamilton is betting his entire legacy on Ferrari, just as the team is going through one of the most chaotic periods in its recent history. And before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Hamilton made a mistake by leaving Mercedes for Ferrari? Or is he closer to his 8th title than he seems? Ferrari's start to the season has been anything but what it expected. In a category where every detail can mean the difference between glory and disaster, Formula One's most iconic team has been caught in a chain of errors that have not only compromised its on-track results but also called into question its organizational and technical capabilities. The Chinese Grand Prix, which was supposed to mark a recovery after an uneven start in Melbourne, ended up becoming a historic embarrassment. Both SF25s were disqualified after the race. Yes, both. And not for a minor infraction or an ambiguous interpretation of the regulations. It was for basic, elementary errors, unacceptable for a team aiming for titles. In Charles Leclerc's case, the disqualification was due to his car weighing 899 kilograms on the post-race scale, exactly 1 kilogram below the minimum regulatory weight. That seemingly insignificant kilo became a death sentence. The reason? A combination of strategy and logistical errors. Ferrari opted to modify the pit stop schedule, which altered the fuel and wear calculations, and as a result, the car finished the race in illegal conditions. The most painful thing is that Leclerc had secured a valuable 5th place on the track. In a championship as tight as the 2025 one, every point counts. And that was a tough blow. But Hamilton's case was even more high profile. After taking pole position and a dominant victory in the sprint race, his car was disqualified from the main Grand Prix due to excessive wear on the underbody skid plate, also known as the plank. This component is crucial for ensuring the cars maintain a minimum level of ground clearance. And there was no room for error here. Ferrari mismeasured the ride height when changing the setup between Saturday and Sunday. The car ran too low, and the plank ended up with a thickness below the regulatory 9 millimeters. Hamilton went from a solid 6th place to completely out of the points. What makes the situation even more serious is that Ferrari acknowledged the error without any mitigation. There were no complaints, no appeals, no excuses. They accepted the blame directly, which speaks volumes about their honesty, but also about their lack of preparation. Because these are not errors in development or advanced strategy. They are failures in basic execution. And if a team can't control such fundamental parameters as the car's weight or its ground clearance, then it's in no position to fight for a championship. It's that simple. And this isn't an isolated incident. This double disqualification has been interpreted by many analysts as the final straw in a series of internal deficiencies. Team principal Fred Vasseur himself exploded with frustration after the Chinese GP. Beyond his annoyance with the media manipulation of Hamilton's radio messages, what truly outraged him was how Ferrari once again stumbled on its fundamentals. "You can't afford these kinds of mistakes if you want to be a champion," he said harshly. And he's right. In a season where McLaren is leading with authority and Mercedes seems to have regained some of its competitiveness, Ferrari not only needs speed, it needs stability, precision, rigor. Because what happened in China was more than a double penalty. It was an urgent wake-up call. And for Hamilton, a recent arrival at the team and still adapting, it was a real test. A bitter experience that could have broken any other driver, but one that, as we'll see later, he has faced with admirable fortitude. Amid the technical chaos, media criticism, and the constant noise surrounding the Ferrari world, there is one figure who has decided to stand firm, almost unwavering. Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, not only hasn't wavered from his decision to join the Italian team, but has come out to defend it with a conviction that has surprised even his most persistent critics. At Suzuka, in the run-up to the Japanese Grand Prix, the Briton was categorical. "I have absolute 100% faith in this team." And he didn't say it as an empty declaration to calm the waters. He said it with a certainty that only someone with experience, vision, and purpose can possess. It's important to understand the weight of those words in the current context. Hamilton has gone from a structure like Mercedes, where everything was optimized down to the last detail, to a team that, despite its legendary history, has had more setbacks than triumphs in the last decade. Ferrari isn't a place where championships come by inertia. It's a team that demands transformation, patience, and character. And Hamilton knew this from the beginning. That's why, when asked if he expected to win from the very first race with Ferrari, he responded with a clarity that many overlook. That wasn't my expectation. His goal wasn't to achieve immediate results, but to build a solid, lasting, and above all, meaningful path. In these first months with Ferrari, Hamilton hasn't just been a driver. He's been an observer, apprentice, mentor, and in many ways, a catalyst for change. He himself explained, "This sport is about the details, and if you don't work in a team, you can't understand how many things we have to focus on every weekend." And therein lies one of the most important keys to his current approach. Hamilton has understood that modern Formula One isn't won solely with talent on the track. It's won on the margins. In communication, in managing the group, in interpreting data, in making decisions under pressure. Changing teams isn't just about jumping into another car. It's about relearning everything. It's about adapting to a new work culture. It's like starting from scratch. And despite the circumstances being anything but favorable, he hasn't lost his composure. On the contrary, after the debacle in China, instead of pointing fingers, Hamilton chose to recognize the team's efforts. He said he was impressed by how the team handled the double retirement. We all remained positive. In a moment where it would have been easy to break down, blame, divide, or simply retreat into silence, Hamilton chose to lead. With words, with attitude, with emotional intelligence. Because that's what true champions do. How he has dealt with his adaptation process is especially relevant. He spoke openly about how he has been observing and learning in recent months, comparing everything to his past experiences at McLaren and Mercedes. Instead of imposing, he has chosen to integrate. And that, coming from a driver with his track record and media clout, is no small feat. His humility in accepting mistakes, like what happened with the setup in China, and his willingness to continue improving show that he hasn't come to Ferrari to end his career. He's here to open a new chapter. Hamilton doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. His legacy is more than established. But what he's doing now is perhaps more admirable than any of his previous titles. He's betting on an imperfect team, an unstable project, a vision that has yet to materialize. And he's doing it with the conviction that, with hard work and determination, something great can be built. He's not looking for an easy victory. He's looking for a story worth telling. Ultimately, what sets Hamilton apart from the rest isn't just his speed. It's his ability to see beyond the moment, to bet when no one else would, to trust when everyone else doubts. And that faith in Ferrari could be the spark that changes everything. The SF25 has, until now, been a half-fulfilled promise. A car that arrived with extremely high expectations as the basis for Ferrari's new project alongside Lewis Hamilton, but which after the first few races has left more questions than answers. The red car has proven to have erratic performance, capable of shining in certain moments, such as Hamilton's spectacular pole position and victory in the sprint race in China, but unable to sustain that performance in real-world Grand Prix conditions. This lack of consistency is the biggest headache for the Maranello engineers. The problem isn't just speed, but the car's technical stability. After a detailed evaluation of the events in Melbourne and Shanghai, Ferrari has identified two critical areas that largely explain its poor performance. The first has to do with deficiencies in the mechanical response of the suspension, and the second with aerodynamic inefficiencies, particularly at the rear of the car. Simply put, the car doesn't behave predictably under different track and load conditions, forcing the team to make constant and often risky adjustments. This technical context led directly to the catastrophe at the Chinese GP. On Saturday, in ideal conditions for the SF25 and with a setup optimized for pure speed, Hamilton took pole and won the sprint. But on Sunday, with a different track and more demanding regulations regarding wear and tear and car height, Ferrari decided to modify Hamilton's setup. That's where the mistake was made. They lowered the car's ride height, probably seeking to maximize downforce in fast corners, but without properly calculating the impact this would have on floor wear. The result was lethal. The car touched the asphalt more than allowed, and the SF25's underbody surface ended up with wear below the regulatory limit of 9 mm. Post-race inspection revealed measurements of 8.5 and 8.6 mm on various parts of the chassis. This automatically meant disqualification. There was no room for appeal. It was a structural failure by Ferrari, and the most worrying thing is that it was neither detected nor prevented in time. It was an error in anticipation, simulation, and engineering, and one that cost Hamilton a valuable on-track result. But this was not an isolated incident. What happened in China has highlighted a lack of critical data on the car's behavior in dry racing conditions. During pre-season testing in Bahrain, Hamilton's SF25 exhibited technical glitches that prevented the completion of a full race simulation. This meant the team entered the season with a worrying lack of information about how the car would respond over the long term in real-world racing situations. In a sport where margins of error are millimeters and milliseconds, such a lack of preparation is unacceptable. Furthermore, another aspect is working against the SF25, its extreme sensitivity to configuration changes. Unlike today's most competitive cars such as the McLaren MCL38, which have a wider operating range, the Ferrari requires near-perfect conditions to perform at its best. Any alteration, whether in height, downforce, or brake balance, has disproportionate effects on the car's behavior. This instability not only complicates the engineer's work but also undermines the confidence of the drivers, who cannot predict how the car will respond in critical situations. And if that weren't enough, the problem isn't just technical, it's also psychological. Repeated errors generate distrust within the team. They affect morale. They create an environment of constant pressure in which every decision is made with the fear of making a mistake, which often leads to more errors. The SF25 isn't functioning as a reliable work tool. Instead of being a precision weapon, it behaves like an unpredictable machine. And in Formula One, unpredictability isn't exciting, it's dangerous. Ferrari has a lot to fix if it wants to aspire to more than a couple of occasional podiums in 2025. It needs to redesign its technical approach, improve its simulations, fine-tune its strategic decision-making, and above all, gain control over its car. Because as long as the SF25 remains a mystery on wheels, not even a driver like Hamilton will be able to pull it out of the hole it's currently in. What's at stake is not just one season. It's the credibility of a project that was sold as revolutionary and, for now, is far from living up to its promise. Today we witnessed a story that goes far beyond statistics or the immediate result of a race weekend. What is happening with Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton at the start of the 2025 season is a complex combination of technical errors, internal tensions, adaptation challenges, and, above all, a brave gamble by one of the most successful drivers in the history of Formula One. The case of the SF25 is not just that of a car that has yet to find its balance. It is a reflection of a team that continues to try to redefine itself, trapped between the pressure of a glorious past and the urgency of building a competitive present. But within this environment fraught with expectations, media pressure, and external demands, Hamilton has chosen a different path. While others would already be questioning the team, filtering tensions, or demanding immediate results, he has chosen to reinforce his message of unity, of construction, of long-term trust. And this stance is more than a communication strategy. It's a declaration of principles. Because when a driver with his legacy, his track record, his influence, decides to stand firm and defend his team in the midst of the storm, he is sending a very clear message. He is here to lead, not just to compete. The faith Hamilton has shown in Ferrari is not naive. It is an informed, mature faith, based on his previous experience rebuilding with Mercedes, where he went from an inconsistent team in 2013 to an absolute dominator starting in 2014. He understands that great projects are not born from instant perfection, but from collective commitment, the ability to learn from mistakes, and the emotional strength to not break down when things go wrong. That's why he's not making excuses or selling smoke. He's sowing a message that, if the team can respond on the track, could become the most powerful narrative of this new era. But there's also an implicit warning: Ferrari can't continue to fail. It can't afford another debacle like the one in China. Because patience, admirable as it may be, isn't infinite. Hamilton is willing to give everything for this team, but he needs answers. He needs improvements. He needs the SF25 to stop being a question mark and become a reliable tool. The margin for error has been reduced to a minimum, and starting in Japan, every decision will count. So the big question remains: will this be the turning point for Ferrari? Can they transform the initial disaster into a narrative of redemption, as other teams have done in the past? Or are we facing yet another chapter of unfulfilled promises from Maranello? All that remains to be seen. If you've made it this far, it's because you're interested in Formula One from a different perspective. One that goes beyond the podium, one that seeks to understand the substance of decisions, the human and technical side behind the spectacle. I invite you to leave your opinion in the comments. Do you think Hamilton will manage to change Ferrari's history? Or is the project already doomed from the ground up? And if you want to continue receiving this type of in-depth analysis, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This section not only gives us a clear picture of Ferrari's critical state at the start of the season, it also poses the most important question of all: will they be able to recover in time, or are they doomed to repeat the mistakes of their recent past?